morning, world. I'm Steve Rao, the host of Pod TV's World Edition, live today from PBS Carolinas in North Carolina, the ninth largest state or the eighth largest state in the United States of America. And Pod TV is soon to be a part of the Roku TV network. We welcome you to our show, wherever you are around the world, to talk about global affairs, innovation, and continue our discussion on the COVID pandemic and what we can do to continue to navigate through changing times. We don't even know what the new normal will be like. Speaking of normal, today I spoke about Joe Biden's presidency for PBS Carolina's Black Issues Forum. My monologue will just basically be sharing with you some ideas that I had that we could talk about today. But before I begin, I also want to let people know that we will be talking about the recent announcement by Supreme Court Justice of the United States, Stephen Breyer's announcement that he will be retiring. So Joe Biden gets his first pick for the presidency for the Supreme Court. And he has said that he will pick a Black woman. So we'll be talking about some of the candidates and also have an open discussion of whether it's okay for a president to actually say, I'm only going to appoint a Black woman. There's some people that say that that's not the right thing to do, but we're going to talk about that. Now, here's my take on my ideas. Joe Biden, when he was elected president of the United States a year ago, was basically wanting the American people to feel normal again. We weren't feeling normal. We had 500,000 people dead from the pandemic. We had people storming the steps of the Capitol. We had people saying, including the former president who refused to concede the election, that the election was rigged. But Biden still got to a good start. He got America vaccinated. Today, 200 million are vaccinated. 80 million have taken the booster. He got the American Rescue Plan, $1.9 trillion plan for PPP money, loans, money for child care tax credits to help people during a tough time. And he got a successful bipartisan $1.5 trillion infrastructure bill passed. But as we headed towards July, we started seeing things really slip for the president. A failed Afghanistan, the situation there, the rise of more variants, which made it incredibly hard for him to be consistent on his messaging, which his critics jumped on. But to defend him, it's hard to be consistent with messaging when the variants change. And also, the handling of the pandemic has now emerged to a different state where the focus is more on testing rather than lockdowns. You also had disarray of democracy with China rising, continuing to rise and threaten the world. The Russia invasion of Ukraine, possibly, which could be one of the worst invasions in Europe since World War II. And disruption of democracy or the concern of democracy in America with the inability to pass voting rights legislation and other bills like the Build Back Better plan, which leads me to my final point, political capital. This is something that this president simply does not have much of. He already came into the presidency with a divided nation. And unlike successful Democratic presidents, they've been outsiders that are good communicators. Barack Obama and John F. Kennedy, two of the highest approved presidents. The only Southerner that did it was Lyndon Johnson and Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton was a Southern Democrat who had great communication skills. Joe Biden is neither. He was brought into the White House as a former vice president because of two reasons, Donald Trump and COVID. But now things don't seem any more normal than they did a year ago. My advice to the president is that he needs to get more of a public relations campaign. Quit going to Capitol Hill so much and the Senate. You're not the vice president. You're not a U.S. senator. You're the president. Have people come to you. And maybe your trump card, play on words, is to tell the Democrats that this is your last time to get things done. Because if you lose the House and the Senate, you won't be able to get anything done. Now is the time, Mr. President. Be the boss. Be the leader. Hit the reset button. Come up with ideas that are bold and communicate them, which, my friend, I don't think you are doing very well right now. With us today, we have with us Mark Lee.
How you doing there, Steve? And we do have Sasha that'll be joining in a minute or two. I'm here to pull him into the conversation as well, joining us from Canada, and of course, always giving us some great perspective, not just about Canada, but about what's going on in the Soviet Union and other parts of the world as well. And of course, we do know that here in the network, he is a master investor and a master chess player as well. So always glad to see him and to have conversations with him as well. You were talking about Biden, and I don't know what Sasha's going to think about this, but once again, he had some very negative publicity that happened earlier today because he was going to Pennsylvania to talk about infrastructure and what should happen while he is going to do that. A bridge in Pittsburgh decides to collapse. So that I'm sure is not going to do any wonders for his conversation, even though he might be able to use this as a talking point to why we need more infrastructure, particularly of physical structures and buildings, since that is part of what he has been lobbying for. Because apparently there was a snow-covered bridge that collapsed. There were no fatalities, and that is good news. There were minor injuries, but there were also some issues around the gas lines and all of that. So definitely, you're going to a state to talk about infrastructure, and one of the infrastructure items collapses. So, like I said, that goes to the point of what you said about maybe he needs some better publicity because this is not good publicity in the least bit when you're going there to talk about infrastructure and then that happens. But I don't know if Sasha's got any thoughts about that and everything along those lines, or just the Biden presidency in general. And then I did have some news around climate change as well that I may share in a little bit also. But any thoughts, Sasha?
First of all, about Joe Biden, I think while the reasons for him being elected, namely Trump and coronavirus, are both thing of the past. Hopefully, coronavirus is Omicron variant, so he'll be around maybe for some few weeks more. But looks like it will subside thereafter. So, since these two reasons are gone, then what is the reason for him still staying and being president? One thing, interestingly enough, he's handling this crisis with Russia, Ukraine, and of that nature very well. In fact, he's doing remarkably well in this difficult situation. And I think his experience as a politician for so many decades definitely helps him to navigate this difficult situation. He's doing very well in that direction.
Yeah.
I think the reason that he's in trouble is that he's being defeated by two senators, namely Sinema and Manchin. And not just defeated, he was backstabbed because while he was counting on the 50% of Senate confirming his proposals, he's not there. He has only 48. Therefore, he cannot proceed any further. But it's also reflected in a public perception of Joe Biden as an affected, rather person who cannot unite even his own party, never mind all American people and so on. And that's very, very heavy defeat for Biden. And it's very difficult to foresee what he can do because Steve, you just mentioned that in a few months he may not have the House and Senate majority.
Well,
Does he have it today? I don't see it.
well, and I think, and this is an interesting conversation, and we're going to talk about the Supreme Court in a minute and other news. But I think the fact of the matter is that he got off to a good start, but he just hasn't been able. Things have been shifting for him. I think the Sinema and Manchin thing, the fact that he's going over to the Senate all the time, and then these things aren't passing. The Build Back Better, he made a promise to his base that didn't pass. Then the Voting Rights Act didn't pass. The John Lewis Act looks like it's going to be dead. The other thing we haven't mentioned is after the George Floyd murder, he wanted to do the George Floyd Policing Act, and that looks like it hasn't happened. So from a minority perspective, a Black American perspective, there's a lot of people out there saying, has he really helped us with, police, racial profiling in the police, business ownership. I mean, today in North Carolina, a Black business in Durham, North Carolina Mutual, is folding and going bankrupt. And that's a huge loss because Durham used to be a city, I know Mark works with Haite, where there were more Black millionaires per capita than any place in the country. So what is the president doing about that? So the point I'm trying to make is he makes mistakes, gaffes. He said, "Well, we thought we could have more testing, and we didn't." I'm sorry about the Australia deal with France. France might have already known. The Russian invasion. It could be an incursion, not an invasion. And when you make these kind of statements, it doesn't make you look any stronger, right? And I think that's the problem. Is that look, I'm a Biden supporter. I want him to do well, but I think he's either going to have to find, or delegate more to the vice president, get her to do more of the bridge building. If she was a U.S. senator, why isn't she going over to Capitol Hill and pushing these things through, right? Well, of course, she doesn't get along very well with Joe Manchin, I don't think. But anyway, the bottom line is we don't feel more normal than we did. And the final thing is inflation, right? So he was warned that inflation could come, and it's still not clear, are we going to raise interest rates or not, right?
That's not Biden's decision. It's
Yeah.
a Federal Reserve decision. So there is very little Biden can do one way or another. It's not inflation that was born through the Biden's efforts of any kinds. Of course not. Now, what he was talking about, one thing about this withdrawal from Afghanistan, okay, but that's not critical. So, because the withdrawal was going anyway, one way or another, it wasn't handled the best possible way, but it's a fact of life. Now, the thing is that he's defeated by his own party members. That's something he didn't count. All his strategy was centered on the results of the election, which gave him control of Senate, House, and based on this, with his presidency, he could count on certain process that failed miserably. And without that, remember Obama's last years in the office? He was sitting duck for most of the times simply because he didn't have control of Senate and House.
So my advice is either, I think, using so-called the Trump card, telling the Democrats, let's pull together so we can get something done. It might be one idea that I have, and I don't know what you guys think about this, is pulling. Well, actually, I read about it in the Eugene, can't remember his name, Robinson, is a writer for the Washington Post. He said you may want to scale the bills back, make them smaller. So you take the bill back better and you focus on healthcare, and one bill on child tax credits, and one bill on, energy or whatever. And then you do that and you have a better chance of passing or focusing on the Electoral Reform Act and that way you can get things done, smaller pieces of legislation than coming in with the big enchilada that doesn't pass.
Yeah, but
I would hire a new communications director.
Yeah. It will take years for him to do it. He has no time really left. And I think he has to just resign. Frankly, that's his best option, and he will be still honored. That a decent man. Okay, he's got presidency. He figured out that he's not as effective as he thought he would be, and therefore he's resigning. And nobody will be upset about that. And don't forget that the Democrats, they are backstabbing him because they don't have interest of party or U.S. people. They have their own selfish interests to get re-elected in wherever they are, get their couple $100,000 salary and free parking and the Washington airport. That's all what they're concerned with. Let's play it and say exactly what it is. And that's exactly the picture. They don't care about Joe Biden or Democratic Party or U.S. They care about themselves and their career and their ability to get re-elected. That's all.
And along those same lines, you were talking, Steve, about what kind of plans can he initiate, and there are other people within his party that are initiating their own plans. I was just reading yesterday about a plan that Representative Chuck Schumer has put out there from New York, and I think that there is a counter plan that is very similar. One of them is called the Heroes Plan or something along those lines, and the other is called, I believe, the Patriot Plan. But both of them are about given stimulus money, but this time it is what I would call targeted stimulus money. We know we've done that before with the child tax credits and everything else, but this is to go to essential workers. So this is to be money that would be going to the hospital workers, the teachers, as well as people that are on the front lines. And yes, they do include people that are doing deliveries like Uber and things like Lyft, as well as Grubhub and the other ones that are on the food service end, and of course, even grocery workers as well. But like I said, when one bill was put out by the Democrats, then the Republicans came out with something similar, but it's still targeting the same group. So it'll be interesting to see if they can find a compromise, because that's one of them cases of them trying to narrow down on something, because there are still people, as Sasha has pointed out, that can't find enough money in emergency situations. So this is an opportunity for those that are in a particular subset of society to get that money and all, and that's been proposed over the last couple of days and everything. But I was just wondering both of your thoughts about that, this kind of like targeted effort, because we do know that during the entire pandemic that we have definitely heard that these emergency workers are at the backbone of the fight against the whole coronavirus pandemic and everything. So it sounds like that would get massive support from the public, since everybody acknowledges the work that they have been doing, even when there are people that are on both the side of being pro-vaccine and anti-vaccine. But I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts about this very targeted notion of going and giving money to the essential workers.
Well, I think that it's critically important that we provide more money to these essential workers. And I've been thinking a lot myself about, at least in the U.S., how the game is changing for employers, right? Because people are like, if I'm not getting paid to be here, why do I want to go? And people have their pick of the litter now in terms of where to go work. So it's going to become a harder issue for even healthcare organizations to keep people, right? During a pandemic and even after a pandemic, what happens? So I think that's money well spent, investing in your essential workers. I think cities can do that as well, focusing on fire, police, merit pay raises for those folks. We're seeing it in cities too. It's hard to keep people in the staffs of these cities like Durham and Cary and Morrisville and Raleigh, because it's a market for the person who's like, well, I can leave and go to another town and make more money. So you could use that as a threat to leave, right? And so you're having a hard time filling vacancies. And I don't know if this is going on in Canada, whether we're seeing these kind of labor shortages there, Sasha. But
yes, there are labor shortages, and also it's evidence that there is a short or interruption of food supply, because in several supermarkets a lot of shelves were empty, especially in British Columbia for some reason. Ontario is doing better, at least. I really haven't seen empty shelves. However, certain things sometimes you can't find it because they're not there.
We'll be continuing. We could spend an hour on Joe Biden.
Oh yeah, we can definitely do that.
And we need a point more. Let's go to judges now. So
yeah,
we need a point more federal judges, 41 than predecessors, but he now has his first choice for Supreme Court justice when Justice Stephen Breyer announced his retirement. Pretty bold move to come out proactively and say, I'm going to do this to allow this president to give an appointment. He has said that he promised that it's going to be a black woman. Today, there was somebody on the news show that disagreed and said, and it was a black man, a lawyer, Howard Eustace, who said that nobody should be selected just because of the race. If they happen to be the best person on the job and they happen to be black. I'll start with you, Mark. And I know where Shaquille Latimer stands, but in this case, do you believe that the president's doing the right thing by making a promise that I've already decided it's a black woman, or would he be better off going through the process? And if it happens to be a black woman, then so be it.
Well, I think the process is going to take place no matter what he says in terms of that, because he's still got to go through the process of getting the appointment confirmed. So there's going to be definitely that whole concept of vetting the appointee and all of that. So that's going to happen regardless. Now, I do see where he is coming from in the sense of wanting it to be an African American woman on the courts, because it sounds like he is trying to do as many corporations and as many businesses have been doing over the last decade or so, trying to make sure that there is representation of various groups within the courts and all of that. I do know that we've talked offline and things about some other groups that are not currently represented that probably could also have a legitimate cause and a legitimate argument that they need to have representation as well. So even though he made that public promise, will that actually be who is the final person that is appointed? Only time will tell that, because it could very well be that we do get an Asian American. I don't think there's ever been an Asian American on the
Yeah,
Supreme Court,
yeah.
or we could even get, I think there currently may be at least one Hispanic American. I'm not 100% sure. I've got to remember some of the backgrounds, but if not, there may be some calls from the Hispanic community, particularly as they are a definite large growing minority community, and particularly have a lot of things coming before the courts that are very important to that community. So
Anita Earls would be good. She's a North Carolina Supreme Court justice. Her name has come up. I thought of Asian American too. Sri Srinivasan is an Indian judge, and as an Indian American, I thought that would be really cool to have an Indian judge on the Supreme Court. We have a couple of Indians in the U.S. Congress, so I think these things are things that we can look at. And I don't know, whether the Supreme Court appointments in Canada, are they appointed by the Prime Minister, Sasha, or are they just elected?
Supreme Court of Canada, it is such a non-event, really, that very few people know the names of whoever judges and how they've been appointed there. Because in reality, in your everyday life, it's very seldom you would even think about something of a Supreme Court. And I think in reality, in the United States, I think people are too preoccupied with that selection process or so on. Because look at recent Trump appointees. He had six the Republican appointed judges versus three Democratic appointed judges. Did it help him in any way where he was fighting to save his presidency and he was bringing 60 some lawsuits here and there and so on? Did it help him that he had majority of Republican appointed judges, and a couple of judges he himself nominated? So he thought that they should be grateful enough to help him with his this, legal situation that he's got himself in. It didn't work at all. They refused even to consider to take his case. So, in my opinion, it's an overly politicized issue. I think it doesn't really matter that much who will be appointed. You forgot to mention maybe there are a couple of transgender judges available, so maybe one of those deserves nomination. And so on. So I think, to me, it's just another part of a political show that just consumes people attention and time. Really, that's all.
Well, yeah, and I
Well,
think we don't realize how much these courts are lifetime appointments, and they can affect the future policies of the U.S. But I'm hoping that they pick good jurists rather
yeah,
than looking
and
at a litmus test of certain issues, right?
Well, I think the Supreme Court should stay away from policies. Policies is not their business. The
Yes,
policies have to be formulated by Senate, by House, of course, by President. The court is there to solve the legal issues if there are, but they are not effective even at that, because look at the situation where even the subpoenas issued by the January 6 committee. Where are all those subpoenas? What's happened with them? By the way, another problem with Joe Biden is that his own appointee, Justice Garland from the Department of Justice, is not doing a great job to help Democrats at all.
yeah, we're not hearing much about from the Attorney
yeah, we're not
General.
hearing much from Garland, and who knows, maybe he'll wind up getting a shot at the
Well,
Supreme Court as well. But one thing I'm going to say, just to make a clarification is the one Latin judge that is in there has been in there for a while, and that is Sonia Sotomayor. So she was the first Latina Supreme Court judge and is still serving in the courts at this time. But speaking of the courts, that's actually where it comes back to what I was talking about with climate change, because a federal judge on Thursday canceled the oil and gas leases of more than 80 million acres in the Gulf of Mexico, ruling that the Biden administration did not sufficiently take climate change into account when it auctioned the leases late last year. So that might even be making its way to the Supreme Court as well. And some of the environmental groups are saying that this is a major victory, because they had earlier criticized the Biden administration for holding the sale after promising to move the country away from fossil fuel, and it had been the largest lease sale in the United States history. And I'm actually curious about that, because I guess that would be larger than when we did the Louisiana Purchase and when we did Alaska. So I'm gonna have to check that from a historical standpoint, because both of those were pretty big and everything. I mean, that was a while back and everything, but I'm not sure what they mean when they say the largest one, when I can definitely think that the Louisiana Purchase probably should have been a big one, and definitely Alaska was a big one as well. So, but I'm not sure how much of the waterways they got. So that would be interesting to find out what they meant by calling it the largest lease sale in history
Well,
and all of that. But this is another way of another issue that he's had to deal with, and the courts and even public perception have gotten in the way, because definitely.
so yeah, the question before we go to the next issue is, Sasha, do you believe that picking someone based on just automatically saying it's a black woman is the right thing to do, or should he just say submit your names, and then if it happens to be someone who's black, use that as a factor? Do you think he's creating an issue that's divisive at the gate, saying that? And do you think it's offensive to a black person that's selected, and then people are going to say that person was only selected because they're black?
I strongly disagree with this, that whether somebody should be appointed by his race or hers, and the gender or any other characteristic. It's a completely wrong approach.
I agree with you. Yeah. I think it makes it too political. I think a president should just say, and look, what I'm saying isn't politically correct. And I know there's probably Democrats, there's a tendency to just say politically correct things. Yes, I think there should be black representation in the court. I think a female black person would be good. But I think if you announce it early, the reason is it's politically calculated to play to that base, right? Now,
Steve, you say it's wrong and you say that it's an issue, but if there has been issues of parts of society that have not been represented, or their representation has definitely gone against them historically and everything, then, if there's a time and a place, and I'm not saying that it's now, because definitely I think that it's probably one of the most diverse Supreme Courts that we've had in history and everything. And I don't know that you necessarily have to have an African-American woman at this particular time, but there was a time that was an issue, and there are times even in other parts of the world that it is still an issue. I'm not sure what it is like in the court systems of London, but I do know that there was a time that, it would be 12 men or however many they've got sitting up there in a wig, and they were all pretty much white men, and I don't know of any women, and Sasha can correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm sure they've had talks around diversity as well. And there have been other countries like that where there have been growing minorities, but the judges are not representing that part of the population, and in some cases probably have no understanding of that population. So I'm sure that there have been pushes in London and in Australia and other places that have similar kind of court systems to make sure that there is some diverse representation, in the sense of making sure that you understand people from their own perspective and things along that lines. And that's been seen in corporate offices and definitely in the courts, not just here.
Mark, you made a very interesting observation that you believe that the Supreme Court, for among other things, have to represent the population of the United States. If that's true, would you agree also, for example, Association of Architects of the United States should represent all population of the United States, or let's see, associations of let's see, a music composers or any other professional association, they have to be representative of all population of the United States. I
There are
think
already
all these
organizations, Sasha, that do
organizations, they
that.
have to select their not only members but especially the executives on merits. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe
Well,
that's
there are already organizations that do that. I'm a member of the Triangle Association of Black Journalists. There are associations of Black architects. You mentioned Black architects and everything, and there is definitely pushes to get more architects of a minority background within some fields that may not already have that kind of representation. And sometimes it's a matter of letting people know that that is a viable career option, even in the 21st century.
so there
Those
are
organizations still exist. And matter
so
of fact,
there
one of
is a
my good
place
friends who
for
just recently, well, not that recently, but maybe about a year and a half, 2 years ago, passed away, was one of the lead architects for the Smithsonian Museum that deals with African American history. That being Phil Freelon, who was a family friend as well as a friend of my own as well. And he definitely did push for making sure that other architects of the African American population were there, and he encouraged other African American youths to go into that field.
Okay,
Now,
so do they have their special architectural style or projects that are different from white architects? Are there association for Hispanic architects? Because
There
exactly
is an association for Hispanic architects. There's even an
Hispanic,
association for Asian
wonderful.
architects.
So maybe the same situation with Supreme Court. There should be a Supreme Court of whites and another one for Latinos and another one for blacks and so on. Why don't we do just that?
yeah, absolutely. I don't know. I mean, Mark, let's go to the next issue. I think clearly, I think there's a this is an issue we're going to be hearing about. Some of the names that have come out are, I think, a judge. I think her name is Michelle Davis, who's been offered by Kleinberg. And then there's another one. I can't. I'm blanking with the name. I think it's Katrina Brown. Somebody. I can't remember. If you could Google that, it's a black woman. You could find out. I'm tired because it's been a long night.
You
Uh,
know,
if you could find that name, but there's a few black women, and of course Anita Earls. I've heard her name, but I didn't read it in the USA Today. But this will be an issue. The president did say he wants to make a decision by February end. We'll see. I don't believe that could happen based on how hard it was to get these bills through, and the Republicans are going to be fighting this hard to stonewall this thing. So he may not even, what if he's not even able to get a nominee? The court could have 8 people on the court. Let's go to the next issue, which we talked
just
about.
to let you know really quickly, the five, because I did find that article that are being touted include Judge Kitijani Brown Jackson, who
Yeah,
is a
yeah.
DC native and everything. There's also been talk of Leandra Kruger, who is actually one of the youngest people to be nominated for the California Supreme Court way back in 2014. South Carolina U.S. District Court Judge Juliana Michelle Childs, who is a graduate of the University of South Carolina School of Law. And that's one of the names being touted, as well as a person with Lee as the last name, but no relation as far as I know. And that is U.S. Court of Appeals Judge Eunice Lee, the former New York public defender who was nominated to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals by Biden on the recommendation of Senate Schumer. And I mentioned Senate Schumer earlier when we were talking about the HERO bill. And then another one is U.S. Court of Appeals Judge Candace Jackson Akawami. And apparently she was the had been nominated to the Seventh U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals back in 2021, and she's the first person nominated to the Seventh Circuit with a background as a public defender.
Well, to be continued. We'll be talking about that. The next issue that we talked about. I love to do this on Fridays when I am in PBS Carolina. It actually makes it easy to organize the show. Is Kamala Harris as the vice president? Her approval rating also in the high 40s, very low. He announced that he was going to pick her again. There were rumors out there that he was going to nominate her to the Supreme Court, which actually was pretty interesting, that she could be a Supreme Court justice. Do you think the move? My question is twofold for the panel and anyone around the world or country listening. Do you believe selecting Kamala again or publicly announcing it was a good strategic move? And why do you think her ratings are so low? What could be done differently? That was the question asked to me. Now, as the host of this show, I'm going to ask you.
Well, two things. One, she's got to get out there more into the public and more out into the actual fray of the conversations, because sometimes she's done several disappearing acts where it's kind of like, where is Kamala? It's almost like, where is Carmen Santiago? It's trying to figure out where she's at and what she's doing, in the sense of being a leading voice and everything. Even Biden, when he was vice president, we would see him out and about, and much more than I think we have seen Kamala and all of that. So definitely, I think that she's got to be out there if she's going to be that. I am also not surprised that he decided to go with the existing vice president, because I don't know, there's been very few cases, and I think it's only involved like some serious scandals and things of that nature, where the president and the vice president, if they were running for re-election, did not go with the same ticket. Because I mean, then you've got to do a whole PR nightmare of trying to justify, one, why you diss the candidate, and two, why you are picking somebody else, which can be a whole, political nightmare in the sense of PR and trying to do some kind of groundwork to explain that to the American people that are already frustrated a little bit by the administration. And then you're going to like toss out your second in command and ask for a new second in command. So like I said, unless you can conclusively prove that she is totally inept and not doing the job, then a lot of people are going to be wondering, like, what's up with this? It's like switching your running back in a football game, because it's oftentimes the quarterback and the running back that are the core of an offense and everything, and you're going to switch your running back without them being hurt and without them doing anything to prove that you needed to switch them in the middle of a game and everything. Now, if one is hurt or they're being totally ineffective and you can prove it, then that might be something that you would do. But I'm just going like, it's going to be I'll say it again, a PR nightmare, unless you have a way of explaining to the public why you're doing it.
Now, Sasha, what do you think? What can she do differently? Why are her approval rating so low? And do you believe this was a good move by President Biden?
I don't think that it was a good move for President Biden to nominate her as a vice president to begin with. She is obviously not his fan supporter, and he thought that this is the political move on his part to get elected himself. He didn't care much about Kamala Harris. Now, she's highly educated, professional woman, U.S. prosecutor. But that set of skills doesn't lead necessarily to be effective politician, namely vice president, senator, and so on. And therefore, even as a senator, from what I remember, she was very highly effective when she was fighting against something. When there was no fight, really, she was not effective at all. She doesn't have any policies that she would support or anything like that. So I think she's not well suited for that role. Now, Biden's affirmative saying that he will select her again as a running mate, it was very unconvincing. It was very weak. It was almost like he had to say something, so he said just that. And in his condition and age, whatever he's saying, in my opinion, not everything has to be taken at its value. So I think that this ticket is a way to disaster. Biden and Harris. Harris alone cannot make it. Biden has to select somebody else, but I think the honorable thing for him,
I think,
based on the situation.
Sasha, I think you bring up a very good point, and that's what I mentioned today in the news when I was asked the question, when it sort of at a different angle. What I said was that when Obama asked Joe Biden to be the vice president at that time, Joe Biden, when he was a senator, said, "I'll do this, but it's got to be a partnership." And it sounds silly, but he says, "I'm not going to call you President Obama. I'll call you Barack, and it's going to be an equal partnership." And then he forged a partnership, and he gave Biden a lot of leadership, on veterans affairs, some foreign policy, because he did know a lot of world leaders because of his work on the Foreign Relations Committee in the U.S. Senate. And then also when his son died, he commissioned this research on, having an agency focusing on cancer research, and then talked about that during the campaign. And so he had a more visible role where there was benchmarks. And I think that's one thing that never happened is this was a political move, in my opinion. They ran against each other for the nomination. Uh, Negative diatribes were exchanged. We do know that she was a friend of Beau Biden. She was in the room when Beau Biden died because they both were attorney generals. They were both very close. That might have been a reason that she was close to the late Beau Biden, who was Joe Biden's best friend and son, who passed away from brain cancer.
Right.
And but I think that if he is going to pick her again, I would delegate to her specific things. Like
And among those delegations, though, that's one of the things I was curious about, and
this is
it's
what
one of
this is
the
what
concerns I have and everything is that, and I'm just going to toss it back to you, Steve, and everything is that there were several core groups that picking Kamala helped with and everything, and I have not seen her even reach out to those groups. It is definitely she was part of the African American community, but she is also part of the Indian community, and I have not seen in my mind, and I don't know whether you know differently, her reaching back out to that Indian community. I have not really heard of her reaching back out to her Greek sisters, and that is a very big organization.
she's proud of her Indian heritage. Her mother is from I think Madras. Gopalarajan, I think was the name, and she would go there. She would learn how to wear sari. She went with her aunt. But right, Indian community, since she's been elected, I was interviewed on news networks about in my lifetime whether I'd see someone of Asian or Indian descent, and we haven't heard anything. And I think part of it is that, but even before she ran for vice president, or even before she ran for the U.S. Senate, nobody really knew that Kamala Harris was an Indian heritage. So she would come to the Indian community to raise money, and then would leave. So I don't know whether it's thing, but I think only time will tell whether she's up for the task, whether she do the job again. But if they don't give her on the job training, then if to me, I think the writing on the wall that she wouldn't run for president is the fact they're not giving her those responsibilities so that she can't stand up there at the mantle. Think about that. The president of the United States, the seal is the same. It's just one word. Vice President of the United States, President of the United States. Is she going to ever see the seal of the vice taken off and become the president? I don't think she can do it if she doesn't get more on the job training.
And she's got to get more on the job training, and they've also got to acknowledge things that, as far as I know, she is the first person to do and everything of that nature. I can do some research and double check this, but as far as I know, there is a part of society. We know that a lot of society is very much into parenting and into family values and things of that nature. And one of the things that people talk about is adoption and being step parents and things along those lines. And as far as I know, Kamala Harris is the first, but has anybody talked about this? The first step parent that is in office and everything. So like I said, she is actually the step parent to her kids and everything. She did not birth those kids. She is their step parent. And, that could be something that could be appealing to some of the voting population and everything, but that's not even brought up and everything. And like I said, she is a member of a major sorority, and I have not heard her sorority sisters even talking about her coming and having conversations with them as well.
Howard University, right?
Right, Alpha Kappa Alpha, aka sorority sister there from Howard, where she attended college at and everything.
Well, let's go to the final topic there before we do that. Just a couple of international issues. Biden continuing to threaten Russia that there will be consequences if they invade Ukraine. Let me read here real quickly. I just want to, and then we're going to go to our last issue of the day.
While you're doing that, I was going to bring up one of our good friends. He wanted us to smile. I think we've been smiling a little bit more since the time that he brought that up and everything. And then he was saying that he did enjoy, which many people recognize, the sign that I have behind me, which is kind of like the 7 rules of life. And it's just like some advice things that I sometimes put up there. So I appreciate him recognizing those. And maybe one of these shows, I'll pull it down and explain what those rules are, which ones I actually enjoy more than others and everything. And we were talking earlier about the economics. Actually stopped by trying to get some food yesterday. And you are right. A lot of these restaurants are shut down because the gentleman who I've gotten to know for a while at one of our local restaurants was shutting down. And as he was telling me, he was shutting down a little bit earlier than I expected him to. And part of that was that he said he had a shortage of staff. He was having a hard time filling his jobs and everything. And then another major restaurant that was nearby that usually would definitely be open much later, till like about 12 and everything, was also shutting down except for pickup orders and all of that. And part of that is that concerns that a lot of these restaurants are having, that they don't have enough staff willing to work, and there's definitely a shortage. And that's just a personal example from nearby in a restaurant alley that is near me, not that far from where me and Steve hung out about a month or two ago.
Yes, exactly. And real quickly, we'll talk about that maybe at the end. I'm going to close out on Triangle Restaurant Week. I forgot to mention it in my city newsletter, but we're going to talk about restaurants in general and the issues going on there. Biden did say he would announce the Supreme Court under February. I mentioned that economic output in the U.S. grew by 5.7% over the past year, the largest increase in decades. That hasn't been mentioned in the press. And Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has ordered military to do more to prevent civilian casualties, as we've been reading about incidents in Syria. And John Kerry has said that the world was not quitting coal fast enough. And he's also another guy that we don't hear much of. I often wonder whether that might be interesting to move him into the vice presidency. He has a lot of experience as a foreign leader, a military veteran, was Secretary of State. I just don't know whether Kerry would ever do it, but he's a known name in the world with experience. And if something were to happen to Joe Biden, John Kerry could be the president. He ran for president, didn't make it against George Bush. Final issue of the day, the North Carolina Mutual going down, the largest black-owned company. Mark, what are your thoughts as a black business owner and entrepreneur about this? Is this a hit for the black community, and is it send a message to minorities that own businesses that, we're not investing in ownership of businesses for minorities?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the full part of that question and everything. But if you're talking about minority support, there's definitely a lot of growth within the minority business community. There are definitely a lot of both local and national initiatives to make sure that these businesses are supported. I know that I've had conversations with Leonardo Williams, who runs a Zimbabwean restaurant here in this area and is doing a lot of local support, not just of his own restaurant, but of other restaurants in the community to help each other. Because sometimes it's also a matter of alliances being formed and all of that. But these issues that are going on with the restaurants are not just impacting the minority restaurants. As a matter of fact, I was reading yesterday about a restaurant here in Durham that has been padlocked because they had run across problems with their lease, and all along those lines. It was actually a popular arcade type restaurant. So it was a bar / arcade, and the owners and the tenant were going back and forth, and now it has been padlocked. And there was some conversation around whether there had been enough notice given to that particular restaurant and whether that was done fairly enough. There was a lot, as oftentimes happens in this day and time, social media that almost forced the situation, because I think that the owner has said that he might have given them a little bit more time if he had not gotten some nasty letters from folks in social media and all of that. So that's another case of where social media has also played a part in possibly the closing down of a restaurant. It's actually the second time that I think that's happened, because there was another popular one that was more of a game type restaurant that was here in this area.
And so that goes to my final question today. And I think this, might be maybe a question for Sasha. Small businesses. There was a couple months ago where Biden was talking about in some of the bills. I think there is money that's been put in there for supporting businesses, and
there is,
in the ARP money. But once again, we're not seeing a lot of that money get into these businesses, and there's been failed promises on voting rights, on things like that. So, do you believe, Sasha, that Biden has a habit of making promises and then being held to the fire? Look, you told me you were going to do this during the campaign. And so there's credibility that he's lost, regardless of why it is, whether it's for Manchin or filibuster. At the end of the day, if you're playing football, we're going to be watching the NFC and AFC championships. Get the ball in the end zone, right? I mean, that's all that matters in the day. If you're going to throw me the ball, catch it, put points on the board, he's not putting points on the board for these communities.
Well, look, perception is a reality. So far, Biden is perceived as a weak person who cannot deliver, even when all his intentions are to be able to deliver. He just can't do it because of various problems, such as not ability to control his own party members, whether it's in House and most importantly in Senate. So, if the man is weak, what can you do about that? How you can make 78 years old strong if he is perceived to be weak? I don't think there is a solution. And as I said, there is an old story about the owner of the brothel where his business is going down, so he's going to buy a new furniture to attract more businesses. And his friend is saying, "My friend, it's not furniture, it's girls."
Hey,
That's
Steve, I know you're ready to get to another issue, but I did want to touch on another part of the world, which has come up with a very unique idea, and apparently it's becoming quite popular. And a lot of people are coming from the U.S., from Canada, from a number of parts of the world, and their strategy to get people into their country is to actually not have them require proof of vaccinations, and that is the Dominican Republic. So apparently, the Dominican Republic is getting a lot of people to come, and they're getting tons of visitors down to the Dominican Republic. But unlike most Caribbean beach destinations, the country doesn't require proof of vaccination, doesn't require a COVID test, doesn't require a quarantine for most incoming travelers. And for that particular reason, and they said that authorities have chosen to manage COVID by pushing vaccination and mask wearing among those who interact with the tourists, not the tourists themselves, but those who interact with the tourists. And nearly 100% of the 174,000 people who work in the tourism sector are vaccinated. So that is why a lot of people, and I imagine some of them may even have the COVID ailment and all of that, they are actually coming in droves, apparently, to the Dominican Republic. And I did see that among those that are coming in the droves are those from Canada, the U.S., and who knows, maybe even Australia. I forgot the third country was that they mentioned and everything. It might have been London, but there is a lot of folks that are coming from this area because of the fact that they are not being as tight in their restrictions. So, Sasha, as one that is a Canadian, and who knows, maybe some of your friends or some of those that are making this trip and everything, I was just wondering, what are your thoughts about a country that decides that their methodology to get people to come in is going to be not to have the folks tested, but to test those that are already in there and anybody can come in?
Oh God, that's a boy. Go ahead, Sasha.
never heard about that. It's something new to
I don't
me.
think that's a good strategy in terms of getting rid of COVID, because then more people are going to come in infected with the variant and spread it to those, and you're just going to continue to have COVID. That's not a good policy, and I don't understand how the World Health Organization or these organizations would allow that. Hopefully, the infection rate will eventually go down. There's now another variant called the Omicron stealth variant, which you know is tough, and we want to just make sure that people are vaccinating, getting their masks. But the most important thing is the testing strategy, which I think dealing with this pandemic now is different than it was when we were having lockdowns, closing down things. Now we need to do, I think Biden's on the right track by getting the at home COVID tests, getting these things out there for the public, right? And so this is what I think we need to do.
I agree. And like I said, I thought it was an unusual strategy as well. But apparently, a lot of people from around the world, and by the way, British were the third country that was coming in along with Canada and the U.S. But yeah, a lot of people are going there because they want to come to a place that's open, and they definitely want to be enjoying the beaches and everything. So yeah, I agree with y'all. I do not understand the logic of that particular country's government, but hey, maybe they're just trying the reverse policy. We're going to cure the folks that are working and worry about the others and hope that they are not reinfecting us and doing things along those lines. Because it does sound like they are doing a good job of vaccinating those that are in the workforce, that are in those industries.
I thought that what's important is that Pfizer is working on a vaccine against Omicron only.
I did hear
Vaccine
that.
against Omicron, that's it. And I think that because this is now the cause of probably 99% of all cases, that could be a very effective strategy. Um, because even if you get sick with Omicron, there is no evidence that you develop antibodies that would prevent Omicron in the future. You can get infected with Omicron almost like every second week. Um, Now, the vaccine developed by Pfizer may eliminate, at least for several months, a possibility of being infected with Omicron. So that could be something to think about it. But I think it will be ready sometimes, maybe later in February or March.
Well, we're getting ready for closeout. I'll go ahead and we got 4 more minutes left, but I'm going to go ahead and close out early. I've got to run to another meeting, Mark, but I'll let you, if you want to wait another minute or two.
Yeah, you can
Next
go ahead and close out. We're right at almost the top of the hour, so go ahead and
next
knock this up.
next week we have Black History Month. We'll be bringing in issues. We'll be bringing in some Black leaders. So Mark, please try to do that. My closing monologue is this weekend we are going to be watching the first of all, we thank Jeremy Robbins for being with us to have a good discussion on immigration labor shortage. We also pray for Anna Lamparello, whose father was sick, and we don't know what's happened. I'm going to try to make the next Worst of Presidents. I've had a number of engagements, haven't been able to make it. And President's Day is next month as well, so we'll be rolling out some announcements about that, bringing in some political analysts to analyze Joe Biden's presidency and talk about other presidents. My closing thoughts are this weekend we'll be gathering in our living rooms, maybe some sports bars, watching the NFC and AFC championship to find out the two NFL teams who will vie for the Vince Lombardi trophy, the Super Bowl. I love analogies, and today we talked about Joe Biden's presidency, and my advice to the president is to remember that you are the quarterback of the country. You need to call the plays that can make our nation build back and get to a feeling of normalcy. You had some successful plays: vaccination, infrastructure, investment in a crumbling infrastructure, an American Rescue Plan that gives money to cities and businesses and helping those that need help to lift them out of poverty. But somewhere along the line, you haven't been able to get some of those plays and score the first downs you need and get the ball in the end zone to show the American people that we are moving and progressing forward from where we were a year ago. Be the boss. Be the quarterback. Call the plays. Don't keep going to every senator and talking about your every move. You've got the chance. Let people come to you as you get in the huddle and get ready to move the ball down the field. It's not too late. You might need a new team. You might need a new offensive line. You might need a new running back. But you can always bring new people into the game, into the team in the White House, as you're the commander-in-chief and the leader of the United States of America. A lot of people are depending on you, Mr. President. Please, for our sakes, I hope you hit the reset button and continue on to lift America up and to lift the world out of this pandemic. From our family to yours, we thank you all so much. Looking forward to some great games this weekend if you're in the U.S. or you happen to watch it in Canada or other parts of the world. Be safe. Talk to you next week.